I want to first just welcome everyone to the webinar. This is our third webinar. This webinar is on supervision for our 2018 class of new district superintendents and directors of Connectional Ministries. My name is Greg Bergquist. I'm the Associate General Secretary, Division of Ordained Ministry for the General Board of Higher Education Ministry. And along with the Council of Bishops, we are the ones who host this training and are hoping to make it very informative, inspirational, but also a time to make connections that you will carry with you throughout your tenure as a DS or a DCM. With me today is Bishop Sandra Steiner, the Episcopal leader of the West Virginia area. And good morning, Bishop. Glad you could be here today.
Good morning. It's great to be here.
So Bishop, yeah. Just wonder if you could just take a little time.
To introduce myself?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, good morning. It's great to be with you. This year is actually my 32nd year in ordained ministry, and to let you know a little bit about my background, my home conference is the Peninsula Delaware Conference. That's the conference out of which I was elected. In my ministry, I have served multiple point charges. I've served as an associate pastor. I've served as a lead pastor. I've also served as a district superintendent, a director of Connectional Ministries, and a new church start pastor. So I've had a variety of experiences in ministry and with supervision. I would say that I didn't grow up in a pastoral family, so the things that I've learned about ministry and supervision have been working in churches and working alongside my colleagues in ministry. And I would say that in every single appointment that I've learned something, even if it's in the midst of I've learned something, and it really has empowered me to be the leader today. And so just like you, I'm in the process of continually and have been a big part of that learning and a big part of helping me to be more effective in ministry. So I look forward to working with you at Lake Junaluska.
Yeah. Thank you, Bishop. And just let me share a little bit about my background as well. I actually started my adult career as a manufacturing manager with Procter & Gamble. And so a lot of my interest in supervision and personnel issues and organizational design and leadership can be traced all the way back there. But since that time, I served in churches from a very rural, small farm community in South Georgia to one of the largest churches in the California-Nevada Annual Conference, whereas I have most of my experience. Served churches for 27 years, was on the Board of Ordained Ministry in a variety of ways for 16 years, was on the cabinet in the California-Nevada Annual Conference for 5 years, where I was the conference superintendent for leadership development and the assistant to the bishop, specializing in supervision and complaint issues. So it's wonderful to be here. Coming up, this will be my second training at Lake Junaluska, and I'm looking forward to getting to know each and every one of you. So, Bishop, I was wondering if you could get us started with a prayer.
I'm going to connect through the internet. And we ask that you be among all of these persons who have heard, responded to a 2-minute opportunity. Help them know that they are not alone. They can be now as we begin this journey together of supervision. A journey that doesn't end with your freedom and your grace. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen.
So to begin with, we want to kind of get an idea of where everyone is. Jason, could you explain the mapping game we're going to play here?
Sure, Greg, be happy to do that. So folks, we're interested to know where you're from. In the top left corner of your screen, you'll see the pointer tool. It looks like an arrow icon. Just click on that arrow icon to turn on the tool, and then point on the part of the world that you're joining us from today. All right, I'm starting to see those arrows pop up all over the map right now.
Yeah, this was a good attendance today, good coverage throughout the United States. Of course, I'm in Nashville, Bishop's in West Virginia.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone, for doing that. That's a great spread.
Looking at yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, well, welcome, everyone. We are certainly glad you're here.
So let's turn to the topic at hand, which is supervision. This supervision is a crucial management and leadership skill for every DS or DCM that is too often overlooked. You've received a District Superintendent's first year, this 2 CD resource, and I hope that you will listen to it. It was done a few years ago. However, Lovett Weems does report out of this work that new superintendents, after completing their first year, identified the 3 competencies that you see on the screen as what they needed the most in their first year. The skills in coaching for growth and renewal, the conflict management skills, and the supervision skills. And so that's why we're taking some time both here and at Lake Junaluska to focus on supervision, for it's one of the 3 competencies, the 3 main things that are needed in your job as a superintendent or as a DCM.
And of course, the bishop's going to outline some disciplinary requirements that we all have to take seriously, but before she does that, I want to remind us of the context in which we're doing supervision is that the bishop and I believe that supervision is actually a means of grace along with a responsibility of maintaining order in the church. And in some ways, there's a paired contrast. Every now and then, those will be in tension. It's up to us to live through that tension and to guide people through. So in many ways, your experience as a superintendent and as a director of Connectional Ministry will be creative freedom. The Lord knows our church needs to be more innovative and creative as we go into the future, as well as being sure we understand that we are United Methodist and we do have an institutional purpose and vision and mission that we are called to uphold. And so, Bishop, if you could just remind us of some of those and some of the disciplinary requirements of our office.
Yes, well, I would. The one thing that I want to emphasize is that as a superintendent and really as a DCM, you are extensions of the bishop's office. I would say that's really important to understand. As a bishop, my life is in the hands of my district superintendents for wherever they find themselves, inside and really outside the conference. People will interpret who the bishop is and what the bishop says or wants or expects through the superintendents. So it's really important that you understand that. It's a hat that you really can't take off. You will be an extension of the bishop's office now. Roles. And as I say that, it's important to understand that your bishop and the passages of the discipline point to the fact that you are mission strategists. And DCMs, you are keepers of the vision. what that means is you have to know not only your bishop, but you must know your pastors and your congregations in order to be an effective ministry strategist and mission strategist. And you have to know your pastors and your congregations in order to be truly effective in doing your work and mission and ministry in Christ. First and foremost, the expectation is that you are spiritual leaders in this role. You cannot help or come alongside people to do mission and ministry unless they see you and understand you as a spiritual leader. So it's really important to keep yourselves spiritually healthy and whole, because this, what we are doing together, this is the ministry of Jesus Christ. And the expectation, the foremost expectation, is that we are spiritual leaders together in this work. And when I say spiritual leaders, what does that mean? Let me point you back to another place in the discipline. Let me point you to the general rules. Do no harm. Maintain trust. Now, there are some of you out there who are coming into this position where you have participated in, well, shall I say, gossip in the annual conference, talking about the bishop and cabinet and decisions around a whole host of things. Do no harm means that you need to recognize that the bishop and cabinet is now your first team. And you need to pay attention to that first team and maintain integrity, maintain confidentiality. You can work with the bishop and cabinet in ways that you can wrestle over topics, but when you leave and go out into the rest of the conference in the world, you need to be on the same page and maintain the integrity, which by way of doing that, you maintain the trust so that you can actually do that mission strategy work that you are called to do in this position. And do good. Have good news on your lips. I mean, we are people of the good news, and part of being a good supervisor is recognizing where God and Christ are already at work and shedding light on that and celebrating that and helping people to see what they can do, what is possible, and really encourage people to reach others for Christ. And then the stay in love with God. Do not let your spiritual practices fall off your plate because of busyness. Do not do that. You cannot give what you do not have. So keep those spiritual practices on your plate. Care for your family. Do not make the church your mistress. Care physically and spiritually and emotionally for yourself and your families. And kind of the last thing I want to say at this point is there's a phrase that I use with my superintendents and my DCM, no secrets, no subversions, no surprises. I want to have the back of my superintendents and my DCM. I need to know what's going on in your lives and in the district and what's taking place. I can't help walk alongside of you, and you can't walk alongside your pastors and your congregations if you don't know what's going on. So it's a phrase that I would commend to you in the supervision process. No secrets, no subversions, no surprises. Talk about your expectations. Get them out there early, set them high so that people know, no secrets. And then when you set those expectations, follow through. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a foundation at this point of some of the things that are net in these disciplinary paragraphs around understanding supervision as a ministry and a means of grace.
Thank you so much, Bishop. I do want to remind all of you that a month or so ago, we sent you a complete reading list of books you might want to consider as you're preparing yourself for this new role. Of course, we have no illusions that you'll read all those books before you get to Lake J. But there's a couple that we wanted to hold up to you because we think they're very practical and make sense for your new role. One is just in the area of supervision itself. When Moses Meets Aaron, written by Susan Beaumont and Gil Rendell, is just an excellent practical resource that will help you think through, how do I actually act as a supervisor? What are the things I need to pay attention to? What are the kind of documentation I need to be attentive to? And so we really recommend that. It's written primarily within the, thinking about large church pastors, but it's useful kind of across the board for who we are. The other is a book by Jane Leach, who and Michael Patterson. It's actually from the British Methodist Church is where it's rooted, but we've been using Jane Leach to do a lot of consultation about how do we understand pastoral supervision as a means of grace and an act of responsibility and hold it together. So it's a very creative tool. Again, a lot of practical kind of things. She uses a lot of coaching and mentoring techniques in supervision, which is very, very useful. So we wanted you to have two practical books, but then also, because you are the mission strategist and steward of the vision, leadership in general needs to be something you attend to. And so we're recommending two books. If you have a chance to read them before you get to a Lake Juneau Law School, it'd be great. Canoeing the Mountains, Christian Leadership in Uncharted Territory. This is an excellent book on essentially adaptive leadership theory, but set within the context of the Christian church, local churches, how we actually create those innovative, creative spaces to become the church that God is calling us to be now and into the future. And some of the challenges of that and how we work through that. So we recommend that. And the other is, given the time we're living in right now, thinking about what peacefulness means, looking at the anatomy of peace, resolving the heart of conflict. We realize that this is such an important topic that we've actually, one of our plenary sessions is going to be focused on this book, and Bishop Steiner Ball will be leading us through that conversation. And so, Bishop, I was wondering before we get to, I'm going to stop back here, before we get to this polling questions, I was wondering if you could just tell a little bit of your experience about supervision as an expression of both grace and responsibility.
Sure, Greg. Both as a superintendent and a district superintendent and as the DCM, I found the use of covenant building and covenant making really important for being helping leaders and supervision be a combination of grace and responsibility. Really, to develop a covenant means you need to spend time together in spiritual formation, encouraging that spiritual formation with you, your pastors, with SPRC chairs, and within the congregations that you serve. Worshiping together, learning things together, talking about things and building relationships are all part of developing a cooperation and collaboration, listening to each other, and all of those things go together so that you can build a ministry action plan or a map. Part of the grace in the ministry of supervision and responsibility is listening and learning one another, not just one another, but listening for God's direction. And then as you sit down and pray and work together, you identify where you are in reality, in current reality, and then you begin to prayerfully build steps to where you believe God's vision is for the church, for your district, and for your conference. And so I would commend the use of covenant for you as an avenue that supervision is both responsibility and grace-filled.
Thank you, Bishop. So, to also realize that the way we have each personally been supervised could affect the way we choose to supervise. And sometimes that kind of self-awareness is important for us, because I think one of the things that we're all dedicated to is to be the very best supervisor we can be. And also understanding every time we use that word, that can be received by people in a variety of different ways. Some people actually welcome supervision. Other people avoid it at all costs. But we are called as district superintendents to be the supervisors of our pastors in our district. As DCMs, often you'll be supervising conference staff. So it's something that we need to attend to. So to think about our own experience of supervision, just take a moment and ask yourself, which does it most closely resemble? Was when you were being supervised, did you have a supervisor that was a micromanager, constantly looking over your shoulder, so much so that you didn't even feel like your results were your own? Or have you had a supervisor that was so laissez-faire, so hands-off, that you were not even sure whether or not she or he understood who you were or what you were doing? And then we're suggesting a better model is gracious responsibility, that my supervisor empowers me to meet my responsibility, but also delegates the authority to do so, walks alongside me but never takes my work away from me, supports my professional development, encouraging creativity, while appropriately holding me accountable for excellent results. So just as a little way to become self-aware ourselves and to see where we are, Jason's going to lead us through how to take this poll to see the kind of supervision experience we've had it as a group. So Jason?
All right, thank you, Greg. So folks, you've noticed the polling tool that's open there. Just take a few remaining seconds to indicate your answers. Most of you have already responded there. And in just a few seconds, I'll display the answers up on the screen so that we can all see those. All right, I'm going to display the results on the screen, and you should see those up on your screen now. And Greg and Bishop, looks like the majority of folks have indicated, oops, wait a second here, I might have fired off the wrong poll. Hold on, technical. Let's try this one more time. This is what happens when I push the wrong buttons.
Oh yeah, that was the wrong poll.
There we go.
So again, this is just thinking about the ways in which you've been supervised. Has it been intended to be micromanagement style, laissez-faire, or as we have been describing, gracious responsibility?
Yeah, and this is pretty important to be self-aware about this, because it can affect how you approach supervision as you move forward in this position. And one of the things that's really important is self-awareness. So this helps us get a sense of some of what you've experienced in your life that'll help us formulate what we talk about more at Lake Juleska.
Yes, quite a bit more.
All right, thank you everyone for your replies, and there we go. Here are the results.
Okay.
So good news, most folks are indicating answer C, gracious responsibility.
That is very good news. That is very good news. So take that experience and live it out in your role as a supervisor. So Bishop, I was wondering if you could just share with us an experience you had in supervision that kind of informed how you supervise today.
Well, I've been fortunate to have good experiences in supervision. I've known my supervisors have been supportive, affirming, and also given me feedback. And the thing that helps in terms of giving feedback is I've always known with my supervisors their expectations up front, clear expectations up front, but have also had the freedom to fulfill those expectations with my own gifts, my own creativity, my own space and been allowed by my supervisors to experiment, and also in that experimentation, when things didn't quite go the way that I thought they might, my supervisors have walked alongside me to help me learn how I might have done things differently than I did the first time. The other thing that I would say about my experience of supervision is I've had supervisors who have worked really hard not to be triangulated in the situations that where I've been in ministry. And that's really important, and we'll come back to triangulation a little later, but it's really important to talk to the people that you need to talk to and not around the persons you need to talk to. Greg, did you have something else that you wanted to add to that in terms of supervision, grace and responsibility and style?
Well, I think as, because I served on cabinet, one of the things that we need to do is to also understand that I was always very attentive in relationship with my bishop as he was supervising me. And if there was something that I needed from him that he was not giving me, I wouldn't ask for it. If I was unclear about expectations or I needed to work through a situation, I think building that relationship with your supervisor and realizing that it's a two-way street is something that is critical. So I encourage you to not be afraid to build that professional relationship. And if you need something in particular, be sure to ask for it.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Bishop, why don't we get into the 12 principles and skills of good supervision? I think you're going to lead us off here.
I am. There are 12 principles and skills of supervision that are very important, and one is really the reflection on your own practice of ministry. Ultimately, we are responsible and accountable to God, and we need to make the connection between faith and practice of our ministry. The reflection upon your ministry helps you to see if you're still listening to God as well as listening to one another. You need to do some theological reflection to deepen your awareness about your beliefs and your actions. I would say in reflecting on your practice of ministry, you need to be self-aware, belief-aware, and time-aware. Do not confuse activity with productivity. Self-awareness helps you keep in line with being a mission strategist. Belief awareness, pay attention to what's coming out of your mouth, and pay attention to what's coming out of the mouths of your pastors. When I have a pastoral conversation with somebody and somebody comes into my office and tells me what a church can't do, that they can't move, that they won't grow, I know that that's going to be fact because the leader of the church has just told me that their belief, which then affects their actions, has just told me that that church won't grow, and so I have to help pastors in my position of being a supervisor listen to what's coming out of their mouths, and that really is an indication of what they truly believe. So reflect on your practice of ministry. Pay attention to those things. Know your authority and use it appropriately. You are called to come alongside persons. Now, you may have heard in the past that a superintendent is called to be a pastor to a pastor. I want to emphasize that this is a myth. You as a supervisor cannot be a pastor to the pastors, because you're an extension of the bishop's office. You can be pastoral, and of course we want you to be pastoral, but in these positions as a superintendent and as a DCM, you have some responsibilities. If you hear some things you're going to have to take action on those things. You're going to have to do something about it. So you're going to need to think about that, and we'll talk more about that at Lake Junaluska as well. And do not mistake abdication of authority for support. Do not mistake telling people what to do as holding them accountable. Just go back and think about that covenant thing once again, and invite people to share ownership. Again, that is part of that making a covenant. Covenant helps us to hold one another mutually accountable. It involves a relationship with God. It talks about what we will do together. None of us are lone rangers in ministry. This is something that we do in community, and we need to learn how to practice loving, learning, and leading together as supervisors. Greg?
So as we continue on, number 4 is really important as a supervisor. Be sure that you make your assumptions, your standards, and your expectations explicit and clear to yourself and to others. That first you understand where you're going and why you're going in the direction that you are, and you have bought into that completely. And then you very clearly message that out to everyone that is part of your district or part of the conference staff, so that they understand what your expectations are. Share your assumptions. Invite others to inquire into your assumptions. And really good supervisors are not afraid to be in conversation or even to be challenged. Never use a strategy that you're not willing to discuss. Strategic planning is best done within community, and to try to elicit and build that kind of covenantal buy-in that's required, and be open to changing your assumptions as you get into those conversations. One of the things that I think is critical, especially when you're doing one-on-one supervision, and if you're helping a pastor or a local church to set goals, that you're clear on the outcomes that you hope to achieve together, and that you're clear on the means that you will be using, or the pastor and the church will be using to achieve those outcomes, and you're very clear on what kind of measures you're going to employ to be sure that you are getting the kind of outcomes you need. One of the things that I hear most often is, I don't understand what my supervisor really wants me to do. And so in some cases, regardless of what you say, you may still get that response. But it's up to us as faithfully as we possible to be sure that we're clear about that. So that actually leads to number 5, that we have to be willing to give and invite regular feedback. Of course, it's always easiest to give good feedback. But you also have to be willing to give the hard feedback as well, to be fair to the pastor and to the local church or conference staff. So it needs to be specific. It needs to be regular. The best supervisors are the leadership with the folks that are supervising, and it needs to be usable. So if I've gotten feedback, I need to know, okay, this is the outcome. This is how I'm going to achieve it. This is how my DS or my DCM is going to measure whether I've achieved that or not. And do not evaluate anyone without that kind of regular feedback. And remember that feedback is a two-way street. If I am called as a supervisor to give feedback, a really good supervisor is also to receive feedback. I often ask questions, what is it that you need me to do that I'm not doing? Or what is it I'm doing right now that is getting in your way to do the kind of job we're asking you to do as a local pastor or as a conference staff person? So be willing to receive that kind of feedback. And then realize, too, that people like to be supervised in different ways. There's some people that you can have a supervision session and you can talk about general broad outcomes and wow, they're on it and they're off. Other people need more regular relationship and a more regular direction, and it's really kind of up to us as supervisors to do that. And then finally, number 6 is in this process of doing that, we need to identify, sort, and prioritize issues. Every day you go to sleep, there's going to be something left on the table. And we've all been in ministry long enough to know that's true. It's especially true as a district superintendent and director of Connectional Ministries. So we need to learn to sort and prioritize issues. What are the issues in this situation? Here's a quick key question for us. What are mine to address? There are going to be a ton of people that are going to bring all sorts of issues to you, and not all of them are for you to address. Some people like to hand their problems and their issues off to the district superintendent, when actually it's up to the local church and the local pastor or the conference staff to solve their own problems. We can coach and encourage, but we should not always pick up other people's work. And remember, it's not all about me. It's kind of a heady job. There's a lot of authority associated with it, and I confess it can feel really good. But to have that sense of self-awareness and realize that this can't be all about me because I have no way to actually achieve everything. So how do I put those priorities in place and push those off to the people who need to really do it?
Yeah, that's part of that time awareness thing that I mentioned early. And many times I've had my superintendents actually keep track of their time during a week or in between cabinet meetings to help them realize whether they are spending their time really focusing on being mission strategists or whether they're spinning their wheels someplace that really doesn't help them fulfill either their supervisory responsibilities or their mission strategy responsibilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So moving on, number 7, help others determine their own solutions. This is really important. There are all kinds of people, and you've probably encountered people already who want to come to you and they want you to solve it. Well, when you solve something, let me tell you that when it doesn't go well, they're going to blame you. You will become the target of whatever is they're struggling with. So help people to determine their own solutions. This is part of what coaching is all about. And you'll have some experience at the lake with coaching groups. So you'll get to learn a little bit about how to do that skill maybe a little bit better. But you always want to ask others, well, what do they think should happen next? What's their input on this? So avoid the trap of fixing it for others. And in terms of the discipline, you'll get lots of calls too where people will try to tell you what's in the discipline or ask you where it is in the discipline. You know, your job is not to be their personal encyclopedia. Empower them to use the discipline, use that resource on their own, and then you can help interpret things with them. So help others come to their own solutions. If somebody comes in and wants to lay something on your desk, you should work so that whatever they try to lay on their desk, they walk back out with it. that they have some next steps that they're going to do with that particular situation. Also, test your assumptions. You know, remember to ask first. It may look like one, smell like one, walk like one, but not be one. So ask questions. check out your assumptions, and in your first year of superintendency, ask questions all over the place. Be curious, be curious, be curious. When you are curious like that, you're getting information, but you're also communicating that you care, and that these people you're working with, these congregations you're working with, are really important. And in the midst of testing your assumptions, let me just point out, you need to make a distinction between these two things. You need to ask, am I doing the right thing? Am I concerned about doing the right thing? Or am I more concerned about being right here? So I would counsel you to ask the first question and be concerned about the first question. Am I doing the right thing? If you lay your superintendency on the fact that you have to be right, you're going to have a tough time in the superintendency world. And be aware of triangles. I mentioned this a little bit before. You get stuck when you get into triangles, and you can get in situations where you make things worse. Let me give you an example. I was a superintendent, and I was the first female superintendent that this district had ever had. There was an issue that came up in one of my congregations that I was working with as a superintendent. Well, in the midst of working with that congregation, somebody from that congregation went to my bishop and shared the issue, and my bishop made a decision without talking to me. And so my bishop had was missing a whole piece of what the issue was. And so my bishop allowed himself to get triangulated, and in the end it really caused perpetual problems with that congregation and that work. Now, I will say my bishop and we talked about this, and we put some checks in place so that I didn't get triangulated or he didn't get triangulated again in this situation or in another. But be aware of triangles. Go and talk to the people you need to talk to, not around them, and don't make assumptions.
Yeah, so brush up on your family systems theory. Be sure you know how to do strategic planning, appreciative inquiry, asset mapping, and then also kind of know who you are. Know your personality types. I don't really care what you use, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, Strength Finders, but know who you are, and especially in number 10, know how you get hooked. And because often when you get hooked in a situation, you end up committing to something you don't want to do, or you react in a way in which when you get aside from it, you wish you hadn't react. And so, for example, it's often a physical reaction. When I'm getting hooked, I can feel it. And my first reaction is to disengage, which is actually not a good supervision skill. Because supervisors need to engage, and if I get pushed too far, I can actually get angry. And so I've realized that about myself, and I never want to be angry. So when I feel myself starting to disengage, I realize that something's going on. I often ask for a break, to think, we got some things going here I want to think about a little more deeply before we get to resolution. Can we agree on a time to get back together? So, know your personality type and live into it and notice where you can get hooked. The 11th we've already talked about is be self-aware. This is about emotional intelligence. Be aware of who I am, what my history has been, what my theology, family of origin, ethnic background, cultural background, gender backgrounds, because they all play into the way I may supervise either very well or poorly. It influences who we are as supervisors. Especially be self-aware in the issues of conflict. And so self-awareness is one stage. The second thing is, now that I'm self-aware, how do I manage who I am in the situation I'm called to serve? And then become self-aware of that context. And then how am I called to manage that context for the good of the church and to live into God's vision? So this doing some thinking about emotional intelligence and and who we are as people is a critical skill. And we're going to be looking at that. Having a coach. Throughout my entire career, I've either had a coach or a spiritual director. Or to tell you the truth, if I was going through something very great difficulty, I was not afraid to engage a therapist to help me work through more difficult situations, either in my professional life or my personal life. So use those folks who are there to help us work through it. And then finally, and number 12 is huge. It's given the work, we can become isolated very quickly. Don't go. Seek out advice and assistance from your peers on the cabinet. We had a habit of working on the cabinet that I was serving in. We would talk about people's different strengths and weaknesses, and if we needed to go deal with the situation, sometimes we would pair people up who had a particular strength to help deal with that situation. Especially if you're walking into a difficult situation, I would try not to do that alone. To have the right kind of person there. And then finally, find a person, either a close colleague, trusted friend, who you can reflect on your practice of ministry and supervision. By the way, that's not someone who you supervise. That's a critical mistake that you could make. But other colleagues, I actually had colleagues outside of my annual conference. You will meet people at Lake Junaluska that you will form relationships with. And there were 4 or 5 folks that I met in my training at Lake Junaluska that I've stayed in contact with, and we would bounce ideas off with each other. So don't do it alone. We are in this together. So Bishop, is there anything else you want to add before we see if they have any questions for us?
I think you got it. The don't go it alone is really important. You've got a lot of people who your bishop wants you to be successful and healthy, because in that way the whole conference tends to be effective in its mission and ministry and healthy. Yeah.
So Jason, I see we have about 10 minutes left in the webinar, which means we're running a little behind, but that's okay. Are there any questions that anyone has for us?
No questions in the queue at this moment, so I'll just remind folks you can send in your questions using the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Look for the question marks, and I'll be here in the background gathering up those questions for you.
Okay, so I'm kind of interested in this next polling question that we've already kind of done. Do you still have the results of that, Jason, or can we?
No, let me launch that fresh, just so that I've got good answers. All right, so it should be popping up on your screen now. If you'd take a moment and choose the response that's most applicable to you.
Yeah, this is interesting. As a superintendent, I had over 100 churches when I was a superintendent back several years ago in the Peninsula Delaware Conference. And I have superintendents now in the West Virginia Conference who had more churches than I had, and I have some superintendents that have less than that. Yeah. Interesting trends. And it does mean thinking a little more deeply about how you approach your mission strategy ministry on the district.
Yeah.
All right, just a few seconds remaining before I close the poll. All right, looks like most of you have had the opportunity to respond, so I'll close that poll. And in a moment, you're going to see the results on the screen, and you should see those now.
Yep.
Yeah, the trend is more and more churches in districts, which does mean doing some intentional ministry action plans and developing teams on your districts to help you with that mission strategist work. So,
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, I'm seeing the results actually representing the trend that we're seeing across the denomination, and developing teams, as the bishop was saying, is crucial, but also realizing too that supervision is really hard to do outside of relationship. And
yes.
so how do you plan for that if you're supervising 75 to 100 or more pastors? How do you do that in such a way that still allows you to build relationship while claiming that role as mission strategist? So that's a key. We're actually going to talk a lot about that at Lake Junaluska.
Yes. Yes. Well, we have some strategic points of supervision, and I will say at the lake we will actually spend a lot more time on these 7 strategic points of supervision. The one thing that I want to say from the very beginning is that consultation happens all the time.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that you want to be honest about when you work with your congregations and your pastors. Consultation takes place all the time. You can't help but be in a situation, even if it's attending a worship service, where you're not taking information in about a congregation, a situation, or a pastor that you will not come to your mind when you have to answer questions or do appointments around the cabinet table. So just be honest about that. Consultation is happening all the time, all year round. And so consultation happens through the district committee on ministry. Again, here it is important that you put together, and you have say over who's on your district committee, but you need to have some people that can be honest and open. It is a point of supervision. You need to have trust in that district committee, and we'll talk more about how those district committee on ordained ministry interviews should go and how they fit into your supervisory process when we're together at the lake. The provisional process, one of the joyful things as in being a superintendent is that you get to be a part of this whole process of people becoming ordained and licensed, and to be able to feed in and walk alongside people and consult with people and help them see ministry and mission in ways they've never saw it before is just one of the joys of being a superintendent. And so take advantage and of those processes and be actively involved. Don't leave that to someone else. And in the same way, do not leave your district committee on ordained ministry up to somebody else's leadership. You need to be a part of that. In your first year, you really need to do one-on-one DS pastor conferences. In the future, you might do some in clusters, but relationship will help you be a better supervisor. So you need to provide for those one-on-one conferences. Ask them to prepare some things, and you be prepared to sit down with them one-on-one. And then SPRC meetings and ministry assessment, as I talked about covenant before, this is a covenant not just between pastor and congregation, but there's a place for the superintendent to be part of that covenant work. It is a place of consultation, and I would encourage you as superintendents that if you need to do training with your SPRCs, so that they get to know your style and you get to know their style, and so that you develop a relationship that sets the stage for good working together in the future.
Just I want to add before you go on, Bishop, just a couple of things too to the previous points. Is it is a distinct privilege to be a part of the district committee and the provisional process, and there's much to celebrate. But also realize that you are the person who best understands and able to evaluate ministry practice for these folks. And so it sometimes calls you to do hard things on the district committee, saying, I know that you're called into ministry, but based on what we've learned and what we see, it's not the ordained ministry. Because to help someone realize that early on, before they fully engage the process or spend a lot of money on seminary, is a humane, loving thing to do. In the provisional process, when you get to the point of ordination, if you do not feel like the person is ready to be ordained, you need to say so, and you need to say so explicitly and give the reasons why, because you are the primary evaluator at that point. And then we will be talking at Lake Junaluska about how to do ministry assessment and some tools that you can use to help you do that, to get a better idea of what's going on with your pastors in their local settings.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you reminded me of, Greg, is that we have this prevalence among clergy that clergy like to be liked. In this role, it is more important that people see you as a person of integrity, as a person of fairness, as a person who respects yourself as well as others. If you enter this ministry of supervision and mission strategy and approach it where you want to try to garner people support for liking you, you will have a very difficult time in this particular kind of ministry. You're going to have to make some tough calls and some tough decisions. But people will receive that if they know that you're a spiritual leader, a person of integrity, a person of fairness, and a person that they can trust. And all that comes out of building relationships. Just quickly, the last 3 points of supervision and consultation are your charge conferences. Again, I require all my superintendents to do individual charge conferences the first year because I believe that will help them more effectively be a mission strategist. You need to know your congregations. The appointment-making process, we think about it in one particular season, but really you're taking in consultation all year round, so you're thinking about appointments really all year round and different strategies for mission on your district wherein the appointment process makes a difference. And then there's the complaint process, and you'll hear some of that really in the legal technical session at Junaluska, but we'll talk a little bit about it in supervision as well. Greg, did you want to add?
Again, we'll be talking a lot more about those 3 areas in particular. Just one thing to add in the complaint process, I think I told you that I worked with my bishop while I was on cabinet handling complaints, and in every case, every complaint we looked at, I was able to go back and look in the records and the issues that we were dealing with, actively in the ministry, we were able to trace them all the way back to the candidacy and ordination process. So that the better we do that assessment up front, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, and that just document. I have a pad of paper by my phone, and I make notes, I date them, and I keep them in a file. It helps me be a better supervisor. It helps me to remember. It helps me to do my supervision fairly. Documentation is your friend, and the discipline is your friend.
Absolutely. Well, we're out of time. If you have questions, you can continue to send them in, and we will look at them and address them at Lake Junaluska. Remember to, if possible, read the anatomy piece. The accountants, listen to the district superintendent's first year. Go ahead and talk to other DSs and DCMs about their role, and then continue to send us questions or topics you want us to address. And then just some closing words, Bishop.
Yeah, try not to overcommit. I can't say that enough. I've tried to say that to my superintendents, and first year want to jump in, and they schedule charge conferences every night of the week, and then all of a sudden they have a personnel thing that pops up, and oops, there's no room to schedule a meeting. So really schedule your Sabbath and your day off, schedule time with your family. Don't do too much. Don't overcommit. Ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. Pay attention to your district office and your administrator. So do that, spend time, again, relationship. And then, and things that are helpful, again, spiritual leadership, talk and listen with your clergy, talk to other superintendents. They're all rich places to get help and support and to begin to help you grasp what this is, this new ministry as a superintendent or as a DCM.
Yeah, and the only other thing I want to emphasize is that pray, attend to your spiritual life, meditate. You need that to get you through. It's a critical thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this is it's been wonderful to spend time with you. If to send questions, you can send them to that email there. And then we just want to say goodbye. It's been lovely, and we look forward to seeing you in Lake Junaluska.
Yeah, we do. It'll be great. We always have fun at Lake Junaluska, and we hope that what we share on these webinars and what we share at the lake really helps you to do fulfill your call more effectively for Christ. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for responding to both God's call and the bishop's call that brought you to these positions.
Blessings, everyone. Goodbye.
Blessings.